You actually think she matters? David's laughter bled through the heavy oak door, thick with expensive bourbon and cruelty. Lisa is convenient. A sweet, compliant Luna to parade in front of the pack elders. But Chloe? Chloe is pure fire. She gives me what I actually need. Lisa doesn't even know I was at Chloe's apartment the night of our anniversary. Another man chuckled, the clinking of crystal glasses ringing out. And the wife doesn't suspect a thing, Alpha? Not a damn thing. She's too busy agonizing over paint swatches for a nursery we don't even need. Outside the study, Lisa pressed a trembling hand over her mouth. Her other hand instinctively curling protectively over her flat stomach. She was 10 weeks pregnant, and in 30 seconds, her entire marriage had turned to ash. The corridor felt suddenly cavernous, the air freezing in Lisa's lungs. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry out. The survival instincts of a woman who had just had her heart ripped from her chest demanded absolute, suffocating silence. She took one step backward. The thick Persian runner muffled the sound of her bare feet. Behind the door, the men's voices dissolved into a low murmur about shipping logistics and pack territories. But Lisa was deaf to it. The only sound in the world was the rushing of her own blood and the ghostly echo of David's laughter. A nursery we don't even need. She turned and walked toward the grand staircase. Her movements were mechanical, stripped of the grace that usually defined her. With every step ascending to the third-floor master suite, the invisible tether that connected her soul to David's, the sacred mate bond he had spent 3 years swearing was his salvation, began to rot. It didn't snap cleanly. It frayed, snapping strand by agonizing strand, sending jolts of phantom physical pain through her ribs. Entering the master suite, Lisa locked the heavy mahogany door behind her. The room was a monument to their wealth and supposed love. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering skyline of the city and the dense private forest that surrounded the Alpha King's estate. It was a beautiful cage. She walked past the massive king-sized bed, ignoring the rumpled silk sheets that still smelled faintly of his cedarwood soap. Instead, she moved straight to the walk-in closet. Chloe. The name tasted like poison. She knew Chloe. Chloe was the ruthless, sharp-smiled PR director for David's front company. Chloe, who had touched David's arm a second too long at the charity gala. Chloe, whose intoxicating, heavy floral perfume Lisa had once smelled on David's collar. He had claimed he was trapped in a cramped elevator with her. Lisa had believed him because an Alpha King did not lie to his mate. Except he had. He had lied about everything. Lisa bypassed the rows of designer gowns, the Birkin bags, and the custom-tailored coats David had bought to mold her into the perfect, untouchable Luna. Reaching the very back of the closet, she pulled down a battered canvas duffel bag. It was the bag she had brought with her the day she moved in. Her hand stopped trembling. A cold, absolute clarity washed over her, chilling her blood. She was a mother now. The tiny flutter of life in her womb needed a protector, not a woman who allowed herself to be a convenient prop for a monster's public image. She packed fast. Only the essentials. 2 pairs of jeans, a few plain sweaters, sensible boots, and her toiletries. She left the diamond necklaces in their velvet boxes. She left the black card David had given her on the marble vanity. She didn't want his money. It was tainted. From the false bottom of her jewelry box, she retrieved the emergency cash she had quietly hoarded over the last year. A subconscious safety net she had built without fully understanding why. $10,000 in crisp bills? Enough to disappear. Moving to the bathroom, Lisa opened the medicine cabinet. She reached past her vitamins and pulled out a small, airtight jar hidden behind the bandages. Dried wolfsbane. It was toxic to their kind in large doses, but in small amounts, It masked a scent completely. She crushed the dried petals between her fingers, ignoring the stinging burn on her skin, and rubbed the bitter dust onto her pulse points. Her wrists, her neck, the hollow of her throat. The physical pain was immediate. Her vision blurred as her wolf whimpered in distress, but the wolf's bane violently severed the immediate sensory connection to David. If he tried to track her scent, he would find nothing but dead leaves. She walked back to the center of the bedroom. She looked at her left hand. The 3-carat diamond caught the dim light, throwing fractals across the ceiling. Lisa slowly slid the engagement ring and the simple platinum wedding band off her finger. She placed them on his pillow. No dramatic note, no tear-stained letter of accusation. Silence was the only weapon she had left, and she intended to let it deafen him. Zipping the duffel bag, Lisa slung it over her shoulder. She touched her stomach one last time, a silent promise to the child within. He doesn't need us, but I need you. We are leaving. The midnight rain lashed against the massive stone walls of the compound. A stroke of immense luck. The torrential downpour would wash away any residual scent the wolf's bane failed to mask, and the deafening thunder covered the sound of her footsteps. Lisa avoided the main elevators and the grand foyer. She knew the security rotations intimately. As Luna, she had made it her business to know the names, faces, and schedules of every guard, maid, and driver in the pack. It was a trait David had patronizingly called quaint. But tonight, it was her salvation. She slipped down the narrow, dimly lit service stairs, her rubber-soled boots making no sound against the concrete. She reached the subterranean level, moving toward the delivery bay. This entrance was meant for caterers and staff. Heavily monitored by cameras, but lightly guarded by personnel at this hour. She memorized the camera blind spots months ago when she was bored and exploring. Hugging the cold, damp wall, she timed her movements with the slow sweep of the red camera lenses, darting behind concrete pillars until she reached the heavy steel exit door. Going somewhere, Luna? Lisa froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The sound so violent she was sure the man behind her could hear it. She slowly turned. Standing in the shadows of the loading dock, leaning against a stack of wooden pallets, was Silas. He was a beta guard, a massive man with a scarred face and cold, calculating eyes. His hand rested casually near the radio on his tactical belt. Lisa tightened her grip on the strap of her duffel bag. She forced her chin up, refusing to let him see the sheer terror threatening to break her composure. I'm leaving, Silas. Silas didn't move. His gaze flicked to the bag, then down to her hands, noticing the absence of her rings. He took a slow breath, his nose flaring slightly, though the wolf's bane clearly confused him. The Alpha hasn't authorized any departures. The gates are locked. I am not asking for his authorization, Lisa said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper she didn't know she possessed. And I am not asking for yours. If you walk out that door, he'll tear the city apart. And if he finds out I let you go. Silas shook his head, a grim shadow passing over his face. I am a dead man. Lisa stepped closer, closing the distance between them. She didn't use her rank. She used her humanity. 3 months ago, your younger sister needed an experimental surgery. The pack insurance denied it. David refused to dip into the discretionary fund. Silas's jaw tightened. And you paid for it out of your private account, anonymously. But I knew. I didn't do it to buy your loyalty, Silas. I did it because she deserved to live, Lisa said, her voice finally cracking, betraying the sea of grief beneath her stoic mask. She placed her hand softly on her flat stomach. The gesture was small, but to a werewolf's sharp eyes, it was a blinding beacon. Silas's eyes widened a fraction of an inch. He stared at her stomach, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He looked back up at her face, seeing the pale, haunted devastation in her eyes. He didn't need to ask why she was running. In their world, a pregnant mate fleeing in the dead of night meant a betrayal so profound it was unforgivable. The radio on his belt crackled. Perimeter check. Sector 4 is clear. Silas stared at Lisa for 5 agonizing seconds. The tension in the loading bay was thick enough to choke on. Then, slowly, he reached out and grabbed the heavy iron handle of the steel door. With a metallic groan, he pushed it open. The storm roared in, wind and rain instantly soaking them both. The shift change at the west gate happens in exactly 4 minutes, Silas said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. The cameras there glitch when lightning strikes. It's an old wiring issue I haven't gotten around to fixing yet. Tears pricked Lisa's eyes, mingling with the rain blowing into her face. Thank you. Don't thank me, Luna. Run, and whatever you do. Silas looked at her with grim finality. Do not ever let him find you, because he won't understand. He will only punish. Lisa nodded once, pulled her hood up, and stepped out into the raging storm. She became a ghost, swallowed by the darkness and the rain. The headache hit David before he even opened his eyes. It was a dull, rhythmic pounding at the base of his skull, the lingering punishment of half a bottle of 20-year-old scotch. He groaned, shifting his massive frame on the mattress, reaching a heavy arm across the sheets to pull his mate close. He expected the familiar, soft warmth of Lisa's skin. He expected the calming scent of vanilla and sweet grass that always quieted the beast inside him. His hand found empty, cold cotton. David opened his eyes, squinting against the harsh morning sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The curtains hadn't been drawn. Lisa always drew the curtains. Lisa? His voice was rough, thick with sleep. No answer. The suite was utterly, profoundly silent. He sat up, rubbing his face. Probably making tea, he muttered to himself. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, the cold hardwood floor grounding him. But as his senses began to clear, a strange, creeping unease settled over his skin. His inner wolf was pacing. It wasn't the usual restless energy of the morning. It was an erratic, panicked circling. David stood up and walked toward the bathroom. Lisa? The bathroom was empty. Her toothbrush was missing from the marble holder. Frowning, the unease blooming into a sharp spike of adrenaline, David walked to the walk-in closet. He flipped on the lights. At first glance, everything looked normal. Her beautiful dresses hung in neat rows. Her expensive shoes were aligned perfectly. But the negative space caught his eye. The empty hook where her favorite faded denim jacket usually hung. The missing space on the shelf where she kept her worn, comfortable boots. He turned back to the bedroom, his heart rate accelerating. He closed his eyes and pushed his consciousness outward, trying to tug on the mate bond, the invisible psychic string that tied his soul to hers. He found nothing. It wasn't just quiet. It was a dead void. It felt as though he were reaching into a dark abyss and grasping at air. A sharp pain lanced through his chest, making him stagger back a step. No, he whispered. He rushed back to the bed, tearing the duvet back. That was when he saw them. Resting perfectly in the center of his pillow, catching the morning light, were her platinum wedding band and the massive diamond engagement ring he had slipped onto her finger 3 years ago. Beside the rings was a small, glossy square of paper. David's breath hitched. His hands, which had broken men's necks without a tremor, shook violently as he reached out and picked up the paper. It was a medical ultrasound. The image was grainy, black and white, but in the center was a tiny, undeniable shape, a flutter of life. His pup. The date in the corner was from 2 days ago. David flipped the picture over. On the back, written in Lisa's elegant, sweeping handwriting, was a single sentence. "For the nursery, you don't need." The memory of the previous night crashed into him with the force of a freight train. He remembered the study. He remembered the bourbon. He remembered the arrogant, cruel words he had spat to his men, showing off, playing the untouchable king. Lisa is convenient. Chloe gives me what I need. She had heard him. A sound ripped from David's throat, a guttural, tearing roar of pure, unfiltered agony that belonged more to the wolf than the man. It was a sound of a soul breaking. He crushed the ultrasound picture in his fist, immediately regretting it, and smoothed it out against his chest. He spun around, slamming his fist into the reinforced glass of the bedside table. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, slashing his knuckles. But he didn't feel the pain. He lunged for the intercom on the wall, smashing the button that broadcasted to the entire compound security force. "Lock down the estate!" David roared, his voice booming through every speaker in the compound, shaking the walls. "Nobody leaves. Nobody enters. Find the Luna. If anyone has seen her, bring her to me now." He stood in the center of the ruined, cold bedroom, the silence rushing back in to mock him. The scent of vanilla was gone. The only thing left in the air was the metallic tang of his own blood, and the bitter, devastating realization that he had just destroyed his own world. The subterranean security hub of the Alpha King's estate was a chaotic symphony of ringing phones, shouting operatives, and the harsh blue glare of dozens of monitors. David stood in the center of the room like a statue carved from pure wrath. Blood dripped steadily from his mangled knuckles onto the pristine linoleum, but he refused the medic hovering nervously nearby. "Nothing." David's voice was dangerously quiet, a low rumble that vibrated in the chests of every wolf in the room. "You are telling me the Luna of the most powerful pack in North America simply evaporated into the rain?" Marcus, his lead tracker and right-hand beta, swallowed hard. Marcus had known David since they were pups, but looking at the Alpha now, he only saw a stranger consumed by a feral, unhinged grief. The storm washed out the external cameras at exactly 1:14 a.m. Alpha. Marcus reported, pointing to a monitor displaying static. "And the scent hounds, they're confused. We took them to the master suite to get a baseline, but the trail dies at the threshold of your bedroom. She used wolfsbane, concentrated dry powder." David closed his eyes, a fresh wave of nausea hitting him. Wolfsbane. She had intentionally poisoned her own skin just to blind his senses. The physical agony she must have endured to mask her scent while carrying their child made his chest cave in. She had planned this, or rather, she had executed an emergency protocol with terrifying clinical precision. The heavy steel door to the security hub hissed open. The sharp, cloying scent of heavy floral perfume cut through the sweat and ozone of the room. Chloe stepped in, wearing a sleek crimson trench coat over her designer sleepwear. Her perfectly styled hair was damp from the rain, and her lips were painted a bold, defiant red. She surveyed the frantic room with a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "David, darling, what on earth is going on?" Chloe purred, walking toward him, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "The guards practically shoved me into my car when I arrived. Is there a threat to the compound?" The entire room went dead silent. The operative stopped typing. Marcus took a slow, deliberate step backward. David slowly turned his head to look at her. The woman who, mere hours ago, He had used to stroke his own ego, the woman who was pure fire. Looking at her now, under the harsh fluorescent lights, she looked entirely synthetic. Her perfume, which he had previously found intoxicating, now smelled like rot and deception. It smelled like the weapon he had used to murder his own marriage. "Get out!" David snarled, his eyes flashing a vibrant, unnatural gold. Chloe stopped, her confident smile faltering. "Excuse me? David, I came to make sure you were—" "I said, get out!" The roar was deafening, cracking the glass of the nearest monitor. David closed the distance between them in a blur of motion, stopping mere inches from her face. His chest heaved. "If I smell your perfume in this territory again, I will forget the laws of the council, and I will tear you apart myself. You are fired. You are exiled. Leave." Chloe's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to argue, but the sheer, murderous intent radiating from the Alpha King choked the words in her throat. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her own heels, and fled the room. David didn't watch her leave. He turned back to the monitors, his breathing ragged. "Marcus, pull the financial records, every credit card, every bank account, every offshore trust in her name. Find where she bought a bus ticket, a plane ticket, a tank of gas. I don't care if it takes every hacker in the pack. Find my wife, Alpha." Marcus said softly. "The financial department already checked. Her accounts haven't been touched. Her black card is upstairs on her vanity. She didn't take a dime." David gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles turning white, the fresh wounds reopening and bleeding freely. She had left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the child in her womb. She didn't want his money. She didn't want him. She just wanted to be free. "Then pull the city grid," David commanded, his voice cracking with a despair he could no longer hide. "Every traffic cam, every ATM camera, every dashboard cam from here to the border. She is out there, and I will burn the world down to bring her back." 3 months later, the coastal town of Blackwood Bay, Oregon, was a place where people went when they wanted to be forgotten by the world. It was perpetually blanketed in a thick, salty fog, smelling of pine needles, wet earth, and old secrets. Lisa, now known to the locals as Sarah, wiped down the sticky laminate counter of Maggie's diner with a damp rag. Her lower back throbbed with a persistent, dull ache. At 5 months pregnant, the physical toll of carrying a werewolf pup without the ambient healing energy of an alpha mate was immense. She paused, pressing a hand to the small of her back, and took a deep breath. She wore a baggy, faded flannel shirt over a loose maternity top. Her beautiful hair chopped into a short, jagged bob she had cut herself in a motel bathroom in Idaho. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her skin lacked its usual luminous glow. But there was a fierce, unyielding strength in her posture. "Take a load off, Sarah." Maggie, the gruff but kind-hearted human owner of the diner, called out from the grill. She slid a plate of hot fries onto the pass. "You're gonna wear a hole in the floorboards. The lunch rush is over." "I'm fine, Maggie, just keeping busy," Lisa replied, offering a tired but genuine smile. Maggie didn't ask questions. When Lisa had shown up 2 months ago, shivering in the rain and asking for an off-the-books job washing dishes, Maggie had simply handed her an apron. Maggie thought she was hiding from an abusive human husband. Lisa let her believe it. The truth was infinitely more dangerous. The bell above the diner door jingled. Lisa stiffened instinctively. Even without her pack, her heightened senses remained. The air in the diner shifted. The scent of damp wool and stale coffee was suddenly pierced by something sharper: musk, wet stone, and copper. A wolf. Lisa kept her head down, her heart hammering against her ribs as a tall, broad-shouldered man took a seat in the back booth. He wore a heavy canvas jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He wasn't one of David's men. She would have recognized his scent. But he was an alpha, a rogue, perhaps, or a traveler passing through neutral territory. Panic, icy and sharp, clawed at Lisa's throat. She was essentially an omega now, pregnant and unprotected. In the hierarchical world of wolves, she was incredibly vulnerable. Worse, if he caught her scent, he might recognize her as the missing Luna of the Eastern King. The bounty David had secretly placed on her head through the underworld networks was rumored to be astronomical. She retreated to the cramped employee bathroom. Locking the door, she leaned against the sink, closing her eyes as the baby gave a sharp, protesting kick against her ribs. "Shh, little one. We're okay," she whispered, rubbing her swollen belly. Her hands shook as she opened her locker and retrieved a small, unlabeled spray bottle. It was a diluted, liquid version of the wolfsbane concoction. It was agonizing to use, seeping into her pores and making her feel physically ill. But it was the only thing keeping them hidden. She sprayed it on her neck and wrists, wincing as a mild burning sensation flared across her skin. Taking a steadying breath, Lisa grabbed a menu and a notepad, forcing her face into a blank, pleasant mask. She walked out to the back booth. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice deliberately flat, imitating the tired cadence of a small-town waitress. The man looked up. His eyes were a pale, striking amber. He inhaled slowly, his nostrils flaring just a fraction. Lisa held her breath, praying the wolfsbane was strong enough. The man frowned slightly, the amber in his eyes dimming. He just smelled cheap perfume, grease, and bitter herbs. The wolfsbane worked. "Just black," he rumbled, his voice grating. "And the meatloaf. Rare. Coming right up," Lisa said, turning on her heel and walking away. Her knees felt like water, but she didn't falter until she reached the safety of the kitchen. She had survived another day, but as she watched the rain lash against the diner windows, a profound, crushing loneliness washed over her. She was surviving, yes, but she was a ghost, haunting the edges of the world, terrified of the day the shadows would finally part. David's study was no longer a place of business. It was a war room of obsession. Maps covered the walls, littered with red pushpins denoting false sightings and dead ends. Stacks of printed security footage, financial logs, and underworld intelligence reports covered the mahogany desk. The room smelled of stale coffee, burnt adrenaline, and the sharp, acidic tang of a wolf losing his mind. It had been 3 months, 92 days of pure, agonizing silence. The pack was suffering. Without a Luna, the internal social structure was fraying. Territory disputes that Lisa used to negotiate with grace were now ending in bloodshed. David was ruling with an iron, merciless fist, terrifying his own people. He hadn't slept a full night since she left. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the ultrasound picture resting on his pillow. The heavy oak door creaked open. Marcus stepped in, looking exhausted. He carried a single manila folder, Alpha. Marcus said cautiously, "I need you to look in this. It's irregular." David didn't look up from the map of the Midwest he was staring at. "If it's another false sighting of a pregnant brunette in Chicago, throw it in the fire." "It's not a sighting, Alpha. It's an internal audit." Marcus stepped closer, placing the folder on the desk. "You asked me to review every anomalous movement within the compound on the night she left. I dug into the guard rotations." David's head snapped up, his eyes bloodshot and intense. And? The Westgate camera glitch? The one we chalked up to the lightning strike? Marcus opened the folder, revealing a maintenance log. It didn't short out. It was manually overridden from the subterranean loading bay, the exact bay the Luna used to exit the main house. A low, dangerous growl rattled in David's chest. Who was stationed at the loading bay? Silas. The name hung in the air like a death sentence. David stood up slowly, the sheer magnitude of the betrayal causing the air pressure in the room to drop. A member of his own guard had helped her disappear. "Bring him to the holding cells," David whispered, the calmness of his voice far more terrifying than his rage. Now, 20 minutes later, David stood in the damp, concrete holding cell beneath the compound. Silas was chained to a heavy steel chair in the center of the room. The large beta guard didn't look afraid. He looked resigned. David walked in a slow circle around the chair. He didn't hit him. He didn't yell. The silence stretched until it was almost unbearable. "You let my wife walk out into a storm," David finally said, stopping in front of Silas. "You let her take my unborn child into the wild." Silas met the Alpha King's furious gaze without flinching. "I opened the door, Alpha." Before Silas could blink, David's hand shot out, wrapping around the guard's throat. He lifted Silas, chair and all, inches off the ground. The metal chains groaned in protest. "Why?" David roared, the beast snapping to the surface. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't rip your head from your shoulders." Silas gasped for air, his hands clawing weakly at David's iron grip. "Because she saved my sister," David froze. The rage in his eyes flickered, replaced by a momentary, stunning confusion. He dropped Silas, the chair crashing back to the concrete floor. Silas coughed violently, rubbing his bruised throat. "Your sister?" David demanded. "The experimental surgery." Silas rasped, looking up at his Alpha. "You denied the PAC funds. The Luna paid for it herself, anonymously. But I found out. She didn't want gratitude. She just wanted the girl to live." David took a step back, the revelation hitting him like a physical blow. While he had been out drinking, bragging, and sleeping with his PR director, Lisa had been quietly saving the lives of his people. She had been a true queen, while he had played the role of a selfish tyrant. She stood in that loading bay. Silas continued, his voice steadying, devoid of fear now. "She had no rings. She smelled like poison, and she looked at me with eyes so dead, Alpha. I thought she was already a ghost. She didn't leave because she didn't love you. She left because you broke her." Every word was a jagged knife twisting in David's gut. He couldn't kill Silas. If he killed the man Lisa had shown mercy to, he would be destroying one of the last pieces of her legacy in the pack. David turned away, running a trembling hand through his hair. "Lock him up, but do not harm him." As David walked toward the door, Marcus stepped inside, his phone pressed to his ear. The beta's eyes were wide. "Alpha," Marcus breathed. "We found a digital footprint. It's faint. But the web crawlers flagged a pharmacy database in Oregon. Someone matching Lisa's physical description, paying in cash under the alias Sarah Hughes. Just filled a prescription for high-grade prenatal vitamins. The specific brand her private pack doctor recommended." David stopped dead. The void in his chest suddenly flared with a terrifying, absolute heat. "Oregon," David said, the word tasting like a vow. "Prepare the jet." The fog rolling off the Pacific Ocean was thick enough to swallow a man whole. It clung to the weathered siding of Blackwood Bay's storefronts and choked the narrow streets in a damp, gray grip. David stepped out of the black SUV, his boots splashing silently into a shallow puddle. Behind the tinted glass, Marcus sat with his hands on the steering wheel, waiting for the command to deploy the security detail. David raised a single hand, his fingers splayed. Hold. He needed to do this alone. If he brought an army to her doorstep, she would only see the tyrant she had fled. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply, filtering through the overwhelming scent of brine, dying fish, and wet asphalt. And then he caught it. It was incredibly faint, masked beneath layers of artificial pine cleaner and the acrid burn of cheap coffee. But it was there. Vanilla, sweet grass, and layered beneath it, a scent that made David's knees threaten to buckle. The rich, warm, unmistakable scent of milk and life. The scent of his growing child. He followed the invisible thread down Main Street. His heart, which had been a cold, dead weight in his chest for 3 months, began to beat with a violent, erratic rhythm. He stopped in front of a slightly dilapidated building with a flickering neon sign that read Maggie's Diner. David placed his hand on the tarnished brass handle of the door. He was the Alpha King of the East. He had negotiated treaties with ancient, bloodthirsty pacts, dismantled rogue syndicates, and built a corporate empire worth billions. Yet, standing outside this greasy spoon in the middle of nowhere, he was terrified. He pushed the door open. The little brass bell above it jingled cheerfully, a sound entirely at odds with the gravity of the moment. The diner was mostly empty, save for a trucker asleep in a corner booth. David's eyes swept the room, bypassing the checkered floors and the spinning pie case, locking instantly onto the figure standing behind the counter. Lisa had her back to him, reaching up to wipe down the espresso machine. She was wearing an oversized flannel shirt, but the fabric pulled taut across her midsection, revealing the undeniable rounded curve of a 6-month pregnancy. David's breath hitched, a ragged, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet diner. Lisa froze. The rag in her hand slipped, tumbling to the floor. She didn't turn around immediately. He could see the rigid tension seizing her shoulders, the way her spine locked into absolute stillness. The wolfsbane was heavy on her, stinging David's nose, but her sheer terror spiked through the chemical barrier. Slowly, she turned. Her hair was short. The luminous waves he used to bury his face in hacked away. There were dark, bruising shadows beneath her eyes, a testament to the agonizing physical toll of carrying a wolf pup without her mate's protective aura. But her eyes, they weren't filled with the gentle, yielding love he remembered. They were shards of black ice. "Lisa," David choked out. His voice broke on the 2 syllables. He took a step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. Lisa didn't back away. She stood her ground behind the laminate counter, placing one hand protectively over the crest of her swollen belly. "My name is Sarah," she said, her voice a flat, deadened monotone. "And the diner is closed. You need to leave." The absolute lack of emotion in her voice was more devastating than if she had screamed at him. She was looking at him not as her mate, not as the father of her child, but as a dangerous predator who had wandered into her sanctuary. "Please," David whispered, stopping a few feet from the counter. He looked down at her stomach, fresh tears welling in his eyes. "Please, Lisa. I've looked everywhere. I haven't slept. I fired Chloe the night you left. I banished her. I didn't mean any of it. I was a stupid, arrogant fool trying to impress a room full of sycophants. I am sure Chloe will find another position." Lisa replied coldly. She didn't blink. "And your ego is intact. So, as I said, leave." David dropped to his knees. The thud of his heavy frame hitting the linoleum made the coffee cups on the counter rattle. He didn't care about his pride. He didn't care about the trucker waking up in the corner. He bowed his head, staring at the scuffed toes of her boots. "I am begging you," David said, his voice raw. "Come home. Let me take care of you. Let me fix this." "You can't fix what is already ash, David," Lisa said softly, the first crack of emotion showing in her voice. "Now get up, before you embarrass yourself further." "Hey!" A harsh, gravelly voice barked from the kitchen doorway. Maggie emerged, her apron stained with grease. In her hands, gripped with terrifying, practiced ease, was a double-barreled shotgun. She aimed it squarely at David's chest. "The lady said the diner is closed, mister," Maggie growled, her human heart beating with frantic bravery. "And she said her name is Sarah. I suggest you get your knees off my floor and walk out that door before I put a hole in you the size of a dinner plate." David slowly raised his head. His eyes flared a brilliant, dominant gold, his wolf rising to the surface at the physical threat. A low, rumbling growl vibrated in the air, making the silverware rattle. "David, don't!" Lisa snapped, stepping slightly in front of Maggie. Her voice carried the sharp, authoritative crack of a Luna. David instantly snapped his jaws shut, swallowing his pride and his beast. He slowly stood up, keeping his hands visible. He could snap the shotgun like a twig and tear the human apart before she pulled the trigger. But he saw the absolute terror and disgust in Lisa's eyes at the mere display of his dominance. "I'm not going to hurt anyone, Maggie," Lisa said softly, though she didn't take her eyes off David. "He's just leaving." "I'm not leaving without you," David said, his jaw locked tight. "You are pregnant with my heir. You are unprotected in neutral territory. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is for you here? The only danger I've ever faced was living in your house." Lisa fired back, her composure finally cracking, revealing the simmering fury beneath. "You think you can just show up here, drop to your knees, and erase what you did, erase what you said?" "I was a fool," David pleaded. Before he could take another step, the bell above the door jingled violently. The heavy, suffocating scent of ozone and wet decay flooded the diner. David spun around, his instincts screaming. 3 men stepped out of the fog and into the diner. At the center was the broad-shouldered man with the amber eyes who had eaten meatloaf in the booth the week prior. Flanking him were 2 massive, scarred enforcers. They weren't just rogues. The intricate brands on their necks marked them as the Blood Iron Syndicate, ruthless, untethered mercenaries. The leader smirked, his amber eyes flicking from David to Lisa's swollen belly and then back to David. Well, the mercenary alpha drawled, a sick grin twisting his face. "I thought the trail was cold. But look what we have here. The runaway Luna and the king himself." David stepped fully in front of Lisa, his body shielding her entirely from their view. His claws extended, slicing through the tips of his leather gloves. "You are trespassing in my presence, mongrel. Walk out that door, and I will let you keep your spine." The mercenary laughed, a barking, ugly sound. "Your presence means nothing here, King. We aren't here for a territorial dispute." He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and tossed it onto a nearby table. It was a digital bounty poster, printed from the dark web. It bore Lisa's face. "We're here to collect," the mercenary said. $10 million, transferred via offshore crypto, dead or alive. Though, considering the cargo she's carrying, we figured you'd pay double if we brought her back breathing. The blood drained from David's face. His heart stopped. Behind him, Lisa gasped. She looked at the paper, then up at David's back. "You." Her voice was a horrified, breathless whisper. "You put a bounty on me?" "No. Lisa, no!" David spun to face her, pure panic seizing his features. "When I found you were gone, I was out of my mind. I told the underworld brokers to find you at all costs. I offered a reward for information. I swear to the moon, I never said dead or alive. They twisted the contract." "Does it matter?" Lisa whispered, tears finally spilling over her lashes. "You unleashed monsters on your own wife and child because you couldn't control your rage." "Touching domestic dispute," the mercenary interrupted, his eyes flashing wolf yellow. "But we have a schedule to keep. Grab the pregnant one. If the king gets in the way, kill him." The diner erupted into chaos. David roared, a sound that shattered the front windows, and lunged. He met the two massive enforcers mid-stride. He caught the first one by the throat, using his momentum to slam the man's skull through the solid oak of the front counter. Wood splintered, and coffee beans rained down like shrapnel. The second enforcer tackled David around the waist, driving him into the spinning pie case. Glass exploded outward. David felt a heavy fist slam into his ribs, cracking bone, but the pain only fueled the feral, protective rage boiling in his blood. He drove his elbow down into the mercenary's spine, hearing a sickening crunch. "Get out the back!" David screamed over his shoulder to Lisa and Maggie. Maggie was frozen in shock, her human mind unable to process the sheer speed and violence of the werewolves. Lisa grabbed the older woman's arm, hauling her toward the kitchen swinging doors. The mercenary alpha didn't engage David. He slipped past the brawl, his eyes locked on Lisa. He vaulted over the ruined counter, landing directly in her path. "Not so fast, sweetheart." The alpha sneered, reaching out a massive hand to grab her hair. Lisa didn't cower. She didn't scream, the maternal instinct overriding her terror. She reached into the deep pocket of her flannel shirt, pulled out the small glass spray bottle of concentrated wolfsbane, and sprayed it directly into the mercenary's amber eyes. The man shrieked, a horrific, high-pitched howl of absolute agony. The toxic herb burned his corneas like acid. He staggered backward, clawing at his own face, blindly thrashing against the kitchen doorframe. David, having dispatched the second enforcer, saw the alpha threatening his mate. A primal dark shadow consumed him. He crossed the room in a blur, wrapping his massive arms around the blinded mercenary's waist. With a guttural roar, David hoisted the man into the air and slammed him down through the center of a heavy dining table. The table snapped in half. The mercenary didn't move again. Silence fell over the diner, broken only by the hiss of a busted steam pipe and the heavy, ragged breathing of the Alpha King. David stood amidst the wreckage, bleeding heavily from a gash on his forehead, his knuckles shredded. He looked at Lisa. He had fought off the monsters. He had protected her. He desperately waited to see a flicker of gratitude, a softening in her eyes that meant she understood he would die for her. Lisa stood in the kitchen doorway, panting slightly, still holding the empty bottle of wolfsbane. She looked at the bodies. Then she looked at David. There was no gratitude, only a profound, heavy sorrow. "You saved us," Lisa said, her voice trembling but resolute. "From a threat that you created." David winced, the words hitting him harder than any fist. "Lisa, I am so sorry." "I know you are," she said, stepping over the debris to reach the first aid kit mounted on the wall. She pulled out a towel and tossed it to him. "Press that to your head." David caught the towel, staring at her in desperation. "Come home. Please. The pack is falling apart without you." "I am falling apart without you." Lisa wrapped her arms around her stomach. "I am not returning to a cage, David. I am not going back to a life where I am a convenient prop for your image or a piece of property you put a bounty on. when she displeases you. I will change everything. David swore, taking a step toward her. I'll step down from the council. I'll fire the staff. We can build a new house. Anything. Lisa shook her head slowly. You can't buy your way out of a broken trust. I don't want a new house. I want a man who respects me when no one else is in the room. I want a father for this child who doesn't solve his problems with cruelty and rage. Then tell me what to do, David begged, his voice breaking completely. Tell me how to earn you back. Lisa looked at the ruined diner, then out at the foggy street. You go back to the east. You dismantle the empire of lies you built. You lead with compassion, not fear. And you leave me here. Leave you? David gasped, the panic returning. For now, Lisa said, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, there was a tiny, fragile spark of something that wasn't hatred. I am staying in Blackwood Bay. I have a life here. If you want to be a part of it, you can visit. You can prove to me, day by day, that you are the mate the moon goddess intended you to be. But I am not your Luna right now. I am just a mother protecting her child. David stared at her, the reality of her terms sinking in. It was a humiliating, agonizing path. To be an alpha king commuting to a rainy coastal town, courting his own wife from scratch. But looking at her fierce, beautiful face, he knew it was the only way. Slowly, carefully, David stepped forward. He didn't try to kiss her. He simply dropped to one knee amidst the broken glass and blood. He pressed his bruised forehead gently against the curve of her pregnant belly. A moment later, a sharp, strong kick reverberated against his cheek. David closed his eyes, a single tear slipping down his face, washing away the blood. I accept your terms, he whispered to the child and to the woman who held his soul. I will earn you both back, if it takes the rest of my life. The fog of Blackwood Bay holds many secrets, but none as profound as the king who abdicated his pride for a second chance. David's journey to rebuild the trust he shattered is a long, arduous road, proving that true alpha strength lies not in dominance, but in humility and the quiet, persistent work of redemption. Lisa's unwavering boundaries saved not just her child, but ultimately the soul of the man she loved. If this story of heartbreak, fierce maternal protection, and hard-earned redemption moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more dramatic and emotionally gripping fiction. Your support helps bring more powerful cinematic stories to life.